Managing risks associated with manual handling tasks. Almost every job involves using the body to carry out some type of manual task. Some tasks may be hazardous, causing injuries such as musculoskeletal disorders, MSDs. A hazardous manual task is any activity that requires a person to lift, lower, push, pull, carry, move, hold, or restrain an object, person, or animal that involves one or more of the following risk factors: repetitive or sustained force, high or sudden force, awkward or sustained postures, repetitive movements, exposure to vibration. The term force here describes the amount of muscular effort needed to perform a task or movement. This force can overload joints, discs, tendons, and muscles, and are associated with most MSDs. Hazards can cause varying degrees of harm, from minor discomfort to serious injury. Many hazards and their associated risks are well known and have well-established and accepted control measures. In these situations, a formal risk assessment may not be required if the risk and its controls are already understood, and effective controls can be implemented directly. The risk management process. The risk management process for safe manual handling involves several key steps aimed at identifying, assessing, and controlling risks associated with manual handling tasks. This process ensures the safety and health of workers by minimizing the potential for injuries. The steps include identifying hazardous manual tasks, assessing the risks, controlling the risks, reviewing control measures. By following this risk management process, organizations can significantly reduce the risk of injuries related to manual handling, ensuring a safer and healthier workplace. Step 1. Identifying hazardous manual tasks. Identifying all hazardous manual tasks is the first step in the risk management process. This involves finding all relevant factors and situations that may contribute to MSDs. Hazards generally arise from the following aspects of work and their interaction: work tasks and how they are performed, work design and management, tools, equipment, and objects handled, physical work environment. Hazards may be identified by examining the workplace and how work is carried out. A manual task is hazardous if it involves any of the following characteristics: repetitive or sustained force, high or sudden force, repetitive movement, sustained and/or awkward posture, exposure to vibration. Workers who perform manual tasks can provide valuable information about any discomfort or muscular aches and pains they experience while performing particular tasks, which can signal potential hazards. Reviewing records of workplace injuries and incidents, inspection reports, sick leave, worker complaints, and any workers' compensation claims made for an MSD can help identify which manual tasks may cause harm. However, not all hazardous manual tasks will be associated with reported incidents, so it is important to gather additional information. Step 2. Assessing the risks. A risk assessment involves evaluating what could happen if someone is exposed to a hazard and the likelihood of it occurring. For hazardous manual tasks, this means examining the hazards associated with the task to assess the likelihood of the forces, movements, and postures giving rise to a musculoskeletal disorder, MSD. You should carry out a risk assessment in consultation with workers for any manual tasks identified as hazardous unless the risk is well known and you already know how to control it. To make use of a risk matrix such as this, first determine how serious an injury resulting from the task would be. For example, would it require a band-aid, or would it lead to permanent disability or death? Then determine the likelihood of an injury occurring. Make this determination by excluding any assistance, equipment, or correct techniques. For example, if a worker were to try to lift a 50-kilogram load on their own, the likelihood of an injury occurring would be almost certain. Once you have determined the level of consequence and the likelihood of an injury occurring, you will see the level of risk associated with that task. The level of risk determines how to proceed with managing that task. Low, act this month. Manage by locally documented routine procedures, which must include the application of hierarchy of controls. Moderate, act this week. The task can only proceed if The risk has been reduced to as low as reasonably practicable using the hierarchy of controls. The risk assessment has been reviewed and approved by the supervisor. A safe working procedure or safe work method has been prepared. High. Act today. The task can only proceed if the risk has been reduced to as low as reasonably practicable using the hierarchy of controls. The risk controls must include those identified in Australian standards, codes of practice, and legislation. The risk assessment has been reviewed and approved by the supervisor. A safe working procedure or safe work method has been prepared. The supervisor has reviewed and documented the effectiveness of the implemented risk controls. Extreme. The proposed task cannot proceed. Steps must be taken to lower the risk level to as low as reasonably practicable using the hierarchy of risk controls. How to do a risk assessment for hazardous manual tasks. The first step in completing a risk assessment is to identify who should participate in the assessment, such as the workers who do the task, their health and safety representative, and management who control how the task is done. Note which body parts are likely to be at risk of injury and work through the assessment together to determine which risk factors pose a risk and why. It may help to look at the task in stages to identify all risk factors. Determine which things should be changed to control the risks. For complex situations, expert or specialist advice may be useful. A task involves a risk of an MSD developing if you answer yes to any of the following. Question 1. Does the task involve any of the following? Repetitive movement, sustained or awkward postures, repetitive or sustained forces. As a general guideline, repetitive. A movement or force is performed more than twice a minute. Sustained. A posture or force is held for more than 30 seconds at a time. The risk increases as the degree of bending and twisting increases. The risk is greatest when postures and movements are extreme and uncomfortable for the worker. The risk also increases with the magnitude of force, frequency of actions, and speed of actions. The longer a task is performed, the more hazardous it is likely to be. As a general guideline, a task is performed for a long duration if it is done for more than 2 hours over a whole shift, or continuously for more than 30 minutes at a time. Question 2. Does the task involve high or sudden force? High or sudden forces can cause an MSD even if they are not repetitive or sustained. Tasks involving high force may be a risk, even if done occasionally or for short periods. The longer and more often force is applied and the higher the force, the greater the risk. Question 3. Does the task involve exposure to vibration? Prolonged exposure to vibration increases the risk of an MSD and other health problems. The risk increases with the duration and amplitude of vibration. Examples of sources of vibration include driving, particularly on rough roads, frequent or prolonged use of hand-powered tools, use of machines or tools where the manufacturer's handbook warns of vibration, workers being jolted or continuously shaken, use of a vehicle or tool not suitable for the environment or task. What are the sources of risk? When conducting a risk assessment, it's essential to identify the sources of any risks present in the task. These sources are elements you may be able to change to eliminate or reduce the likelihood of an MSD. Common sources of risk include work area design and layout, loads, tools, systems of work, workplace environment. Identifying and understanding these sources of risk are crucial for implementing effective control measures to prevent MSDs in the workplace. Step 3. Controlling the risks. The WHS regulation mandates working through the hierarchy of control measures when managing risks from hazardous manual tasks. The hierarchy ranks control measures from the highest to the lowest level of protection and reliability. Elimination. Eliminating risks is the most effective control measure and should be the first aim. This can be achieved by avoiding the introduction of hazards into the workplace, incorporating risk control measures during the planning or design stages of an item, process, or workplace, If elimination isn't practicable because it hinders the end product or service, the risk must be minimized as much as possible. Substitution. Replace the hazard wholly or partly with something safer. Use mechanical aids instead of manual lifting. Replace heavy loads with lighter, more manageable ones. Replace heavy items with lighter, smaller, or easier to handle items. Be aware of the risk of increased repetition. Replace hand tools with power tools to reduce the level of force required to do the task. Coordinate with suppliers to replace packaging with packaging designed to allow goods to be handled using powered plant. Handle items mechanically to reduce the risk to the worker. Isolation. Separate the hazard from people. Create barriers between workers and hazards. Designate specific areas for hazardous tasks to limit exposure. Isolate vibrating machinery from the user. Enclose the machinery or the personnel, creating an isolating barrier between the hazard and the person at risk. Redesign the workplace to minimize distractions from the task performed. Engineering controls. Implement physical changes to the work area, tools, load, environment, method of handling, or work organization. Redesign workstations to promote neutral postures. Use adjustable equipment to fit various worker sizes and reduce awkward postures. Use mechanical lifting aids and trolleys. Design the workplace to minimize the need to lift and move things. Provide workstations that are height adjustable. Administrative controls. If risk remains, minimize it as much as possible with administrative controls. These controls are less effective because they rely on human behavior and supervision, and should only be used when no other controls are reasonably practicable as an interim measure, or to supplement higher-level controls. Administrative controls include work methods or policies and procedures, such as lifting procedures. For example, implement job rotation to reduce prolonged exposure to hazards. Develop and enforce safe work procedures, including what devices should be used, how many workers are required to operate them, and what training those workers need. Rotate workers between different tasks. Personal protective equipment, PPE. Any remaining risks must be minimized with suitable PPE. PPE is the least effective control measure because it relies on proper use by workers. PPE should be used when other control measures aren't reasonably practicable, as an interim measure, or to supplement higher-level controls. For example, provide gloves, back supports, shock-absorbent shoes, or other protective gear. Ensure PPE is properly maintained and used correctly by workers. The hierarchy of control measures provides a structured approach to managing risks from hazardous manual tasks. By prioritizing elimination and minimizing risks through substitution, isolation, and engineering controls, PCBUs can effectively protect workers from MSDs. Administrative controls and PPE should be used as supplementary measures to address any remaining risks. Step 4. Reviewing control measures. Control measures implemented to protect health and safety must be regularly reviewed to ensure they remain effective in controlling risks associated with MSDs from hazardous manual tasks. Control measures should be reviewed. Effectiveness. Review when the control measure does not sufficiently minimize risks. Changes in workplace. Prior to changes likely to introduce new or different health and safety risks that current measures may not effectively control. New hazards or risks, upon identification of new or relevant hazards or risks. Consultation results. When consultation with workers or health and safety representatives indicates a review is necessary. Request by health and safety representative. Upon request, if a representative reasonably believes there's a risk affecting workers' health and safety that hasn't been adequately addressed. Reviews can occur through workplace inspections to assess the design and operation of control measures, through consultation with workers and safety representatives, and through testing and analysis to verify the effectiveness of control measures. Key review questions. Are control measures effectively designed and operated without creating new risks? Have introduced control measures led to unintended issues? Have all hazards been identified and appropriately addressed? Are workers actively participating in the risk management process, reporting concerns promptly? Have new work methods or equipment reduced physical strain effectively? Are safety procedures consistently followed? Has training on hazardous manual tasks and control measures been successful? Is there evidence of reduced frequency and severity of MSDs over time? Are there planned alterations to structures, plants, or processes that could expose workers to new risks? Have any incidents occurred due to hazardous manual tasks? Is there new information suggesting current controls are no longer effective? If issues are identified during the review, revisit the risk management process. Update information and reassess risk controls. Make necessary adjustments to ensure ongoing effectiveness in controlling risks.